So first question was number 1. So just pull up the homework if you've got it nearby. What was the answer to number 1? You had 3 options, 1, 2, or 3. Which was the correct option for the argument? I heard that you have a crush on either Luke or John, but I know you don't like Luke, so you must have a crush on John. What argument structure was this?
Was it 2, Professor?
It was actually not 2. 2 was correct in that you recognize that they're connected to each other. It's not 1. So you got that part right. But 3 is the correct answer because it's B and C working together to prove A. Or I mean, A and B working together to prove C. C is the conclusion. You must have a crush on John. And how do you come to it? Well, if you knew that you had either a crush on Luke or John, that wouldn't be enough to conclude it. And I know you don't like Luke. That's not enough to conclude just John. It's the 2 of them together. So 3 was the correct answer for that one. Again, if you get it wrong, it's not going to be the end of the world because even if as long as you put some sort of explanation or something, you will get credit. All right. What about number 2? Anyone have the right answer for 2? It could have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Is it a 4?
It was 4. 4 was the correct answer. Now, if you put a good explanation, I have on the past given, if you explain very well why it's one of the other ones, you could have gotten yourself some credit. But the reason why is because Z is the main conclusion that I'm not a good professor. And then Y and X are 2 independent reasons that I'm not a good professor. And then W is a support for X. So my explanations are very unclear, and proof of this is this, he said, do that thing. So that one is correct. All right, number 3. This was the argument somebody might give for why you should vote for Donald Trump. So the conclusion I gave you all, the conclusion was that he's going to keep America great. So C was number 1. That you should vote for Donald Trump. And then looking at the structure, what is the relationship between A and C? Just looking there. How would you describe that relationship in the little arrow, A and C?
Ariel?
Yeah, so this is a direct premise here that this is just one reason to support C. So and then all of these other things are going to be serial reasons with respect. So basically, A is going to be the second most general thing, or it's going to be the thing that directly supports this. So given this argument, what goes in slot A? What is the main super reason to vote for Donald Trump in this argument?
Trump is going to keep America great?
Yep, he's going to keep America great. So A was number
2.
Now, E and D, if you just concentrate here, you'll see are going to be convergent reasons to support A. So what we're looking for here is B, one of the ways Trump is going to keep America great, and D is the other way. So what are the 2 main claims or the 2 main ways he's going to keep America great? And the way to think about this is you're looking for the more general statements. These are the general things. And then because if you just look here, it's serial. F is going to be proof of D. G is going to be proof of F. And then B is going to be E is going to be proof of B. So given that, anyone want to take a stab at what B and D are?
It's 3 and 5, right? The Law and Order and the future generations are proud to be American.
Yep. 3 and 5. E, F, I forgot to put G down here. So yeah, 3 is he's going to keep America, he's going to bring law and order back. That's one way he's going to keep America great. And the other is he's going to teach American children to be proud to be American again. And then what are the last ones? Well, we know that E supports the law and order one. And then F supports the make people proud. And G supports whatever F is. So anyone want to take a stab at the last ones?
So 4, 7, and 6.
We have 4 is going to be E. That one's the one that he's going to increase funding for police. That is going to bring the law and order back. 4 explains 3. And then F and G, these ones, if you gave me a good explanation, you could convince me that they go either way. But the way I was thinking of them is 6, and 7. So 6 is he's going to change the curriculum, and then 7 explains how he's going to change it. However, you could explain to me, you could, if in your explanation, give me a reason to think of them the other way, and there's a chance you can get credit. And even if you flip these two the wrong way, you won't lose many points on that one. But this is the way I was thinking of it. All right, now the last one is, or the second to last one is this democracy. In a democracy, it takes forever for new laws to get passed. This is because new law has to be debated for months and months. Modern effective government is one that can come up with laws quickly, blah, 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 blah. So here's the structure for that one. First question is, which of these 6 sentences, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, is the conclusion? The conclusion that goes in slot C. I'll give you a clue. There was a giveaway word there.
6.
6.
6, yep. C is 6. This is if somebody said this, this is what they would be arguing, that democracy is not an effective government in the modern world. That is their main conclusion. And then looking at this, what you see is A and B together provide linked reasons to think that democracy is not good in the modern world. So what are the 2 reasons that together work to explain why democracy is not a good form of government in the modern world? What are the 2 claims that fit together here?
4 and 1.
So 1 is correct. 1 is that democracy takes forever for new laws to be passed. So that one is correct. A is 1. And then the second one is B. And so the question here is, what is it about democracy that means it's not good? What is it? If democracy takes forever and ever, why is that relevant? Well,
3.
Is it 3?
it is 3. 3, which is in the modern world, an effective government has to be fast. So it's 1 and then 3, because it's an effective. If I just told you in the modern world, a government needs to be fast, democracy is slow, therefore democracy is bad. That's an argument by itself. So it's 1 and then 3. Then what 2 does is give an explanation of something. It gives an explanation of 1. So where do we put 2 on this overall structure?
D.
Yeah, it's D. 2 goes here because it is the reason that it takes forever for new laws to get passed, which leaves E and F. Now, E and F are together linked premises that just prove B. So because of this, it makes no difference what order you put them in. They're linked, they're doing just as much work as each other. So that means that these 2 are either 4/5, and this one is also 4/5. So it's either 4 and 5 or 5 and 4. Doesn't matter which way, as long as you've got one of each. And that's something to remember. In a structure like this, as long as they are on an equal footing here, it really doesn't matter. So if this was the entire argument, this could also go in either order. It's only when you consider them together that the order matters, or when you consider the whole thing or how they fit. But if you're just focusing on linked premises, they can go in either order. All right, let me put up the last one, which was the most complicated one. And again, if I just erase that too fast, the recording will be going up later tonight. So sorry, I just erased it too quickly. And again, I will also be giving you the answers when I send these back tomorrow. So let me just draw up the drawing for C, A, D, G, H, I. B, E, F, J. All right. So here is the structure for this one, which leaves us with all of these letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. So, like always, the best way to start is find the conclusion. which of all of these sentences, critical thinking is the most important skill a person can learn in college, for one thing, blah, 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 companies really want this, yada, yada. What goes in slot A? Or slot C? Which of those sentences is the conclusion?
First.
The first one, correct. This is the thing that the rest of them are trying to prove, that critical thinking is the most important skill a person can learn in college. Then so once we know that, we can say that there's basically two things going on here. What's the relationship between A and B? If we just look at A, B, and C, how would you describe this?
Convergent.
Yeah, this is just two convergent premises. So the way you can think of that is, well, A is going to be one of the main reasons to think that critical thinking is important. B is going to be the other main reason. And then everything else, D, G, H, I, is going to support A. And then E, F support B, and J supports F. So given this, what are our next two? Which is A and which is B?
Is it 2 and 7?
Yep, 2 and 7. So A is number 2. And B is number 7. Now, why is this the case? Well, these are the two main reasons to think that critical thinking is important. Number one, it helps you with your job and your career. That is just a general reason to think that critical thinking is going to help you. And then 7, another reason. These key terms. So another reason is that it helps you achieve personal fulfillment. So those are the very general reasons to think that critical thinking is the most important skill you can learn in college. All right, then that leaves all the other ones. So we can now say that D is the main reason to support A, i.e. D is the main reason to think that it's going to help you in your career. And then G, H, and I are the three things that together prove that that's going to help you in your career. So let's focus on D first. What of the premises is D? 3. Elio says 3. Is Elio correct?
Yes.
Yes, he is. So 3. And this is the main thing of why is it going to help you with your career? Well, it's going to help you with your career because companies really like critical thinking skills. And then G, H, and I are together going to explain why companies value employees with good critical thinking skills. So what are 3 of G, H, I? What are the 3 that correspond?
Is it 4, 5, 6?
Let me double check and make sure. It is 4, 5, 6. So G, H, I. Pop quiz, what order do they have to go in?
It doesn't matter.
Does not matter. Yep. 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. As long as you have those 3 in those slots, it's correct. Now that just leaves us with E, F, J. This one, E and F do matter in order because one of them has J underneath. So looking at this, we know that E, F, and J are going to be the 3 reasons to believe that critical thinking helps with personal fulfillment. So these are going to be 2 reasons that together prove that critical thinking helps with personal fulfillment, and then J is going to help with one of them. So let's just knock this out. What goes in E, what goes in F, and what goes in J? E is 8, F is 9. That is correct. 8 and 9. Now, why? Well, what 8 is saying is to achieve personal fulfillment, a person needs to know what's in their own best interests. And F is critical thinking helps you know what's in your best interests. And then that leaves J, and 10 is the explanation for why why critical thinking helps you know what's in your best interest. And it does it because you can accurately predict the effects of your decisions, which leaves J as 10. So that's the correct answer for this one. Again, if you didn't get it all right, you're almost certainly still going to get a good amount of credit. So do not fret about this homework. Also, there are many homeworks on the semester, and as long as you're doing them, they are going to be easier from here on out. So if this one didn't go as well as you wanted, that does not mean nothing that's happened so far is going to mean that you can't get a grade you're happy with at the end of the semester. Even if you got a 0 on this, everything's still on the table. All right, any other questions on the homework generally? Again, if you came in late, I'm gonna post this video at the probably in a couple hours once it uploads properly, and then you can rewatch what I talked about at the very beginning if you have any questions, and I will be handing these back to you all tomorrow. Any last questions on this? All right, well, in that case, we can jump onto fallacies, which we are now going to be transitioning from the good reasoning to bad reasoning part of the semester. So we've talked about what it is to reason well and some structures for reasoning well. Now, the next two classes, we're going to talk about fallacies, which are basically defined as reasoning that can look good, but is actually bad. And the reason why fallacies are worth talking about is they are things that you are going to encounter in your everyday life. And very often, these sorts of fallacies are things that are going to be used against you in things like advertisements, or when somebody tries to convince you to do something that isn't in your best interest, they might employ a fallacy. And what a fallacy or fallacious reasoning is again, reasoning that looks good or feels like, oh yeah, that's a good way of getting to this conclusion, but in truth, it's not guaranteed to get you the right answer or a good answer. So in truth, we've actually seen a couple fallacies already. This was back in when I was talking about good ways of reasoning, I contrasted those with some bad ways. So does anyone remember what those fallacies were? One of them was, we had modus ponens, which was good. Modus ponens. And we said that was a good way of reasoning, but we said there was something that looked like modus ponens, which was bad reasoning. Anyone remember what it was called? B. So if A then B was, and then A conclusion B. This was modus ponens. Then we had this other one which looked like this. If A then B, B conclusion A. Anyone remember what it was called?
Is it modus tollens?
So modus tollens was actually the other good one. This one was affirming the consequent. Affirming the consequent. Again, the names don't matter. But this right here was a fallacy. It was a type of reasoning that looks good, but is not actually good. So this is something like, if dogs had wings, they could fly. Dogs can fly. Actually, no, let's think about what's something that actually flies but doesn't have wings. If rockets had wings, they could fly. Rockets can fly. Conclusion, rockets have wings. And this was supposed to, and you can see in this particular case why it is that we know it's a fallacy. It looks like a good way of reasoning when you just consider it this way, but in this particular case, we know as a matter of fact, rockets don't have wings, and yet they still fly. So that was the first type of fallacy we talked about. Now what I'm going to do is talk about some other types of fallacies that are commonly relied upon in everyday discourse, everyday conversation, everyday ways of interacting. And it's useful to know these so that you can recognize when they're being used poorly. And the reason why they are, they look so good, or why they look like good ways of reasoning, is that very often these fallacies look very similar to what is actually a good way of approaching a question. They all are related to similar looking good reasoning. So what I'm going to go to is we've got 5 this week and some more next week. And what we're going to do is just go through talking about what these fallacies are, why you should be on the lookout for them, and why they look like something which is actually good reasoning. So the first one is appeal to authority. So what is an appeal to authority? First off, what is an appeal? What is it to appeal to someone? And I'm sorry about the reflection. Hopefully you can still see. Appeal. A-P-P-E-A-L. Anyone know what it means?
Like subject.
Say that again.
Object.
Yeah, so it's like an objection, or very often in the court system is where you hear it, in which when you appeal to something, it's not always necessarily an objection, but when somebody appeals in court and they are objecting to the view, what are they actually doing? What is it to appeal in a court system? Like if you're charged with murder, you have a trial, you're found guilty, and you then appeal that decision. What does that mean exactly? Who do you then go and talk?
Dispute?
Say that again?
Like a dispute?
Yeah, so when you dispute it though, where do you go with it? If you dispute that decision, what do? You don't just talk to the same person that you were talking to the whole time. Like if this jury finds you guilty and you then appeal, you don't then go and just talk to that jury again. Where do you go? Anyone know?
Another judge?
Yeah, you go to another judge. You go up a level. So here, U.S. Court System 101.
To the circuit, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. You get charged down here for a crime, and you get charged at a local level. So if you commit murder, say, you're going to get charged in a local jurisdiction, so here it would be like a county court. So if you commit murder in Kings County, Brooklyn, you would do it here. Now, if you get found guilty, but you disagree with that, you now go up to the state level court and you go to another court. And by appeal, we mean you reach out to somebody new, you reach out to a higher level. If you appeal at the state level and still are found guilty and want to keep going, where do you appeal to? U.S. Court System 101.
The Court of
Circuit.
Appellate.
The district court.
So I actually don't know. I think district might be down here.
Yeah.
I think district is here, and then you go to state, and then once you get past state, where do you go?
Circuit.
Supreme Court.
Oh.
Supreme is somewhere at the top. Supreme, I don't know how circuit works. Circuit's somewhere near, but basically there's a whole bunch of levels, and this is why in the United States, court cases can go on forever and ever, because if you've got the money to keep appealing and paying for a lawyer, you just keep going all the way up the level. So county goes to this goes to this goes to this. So, but in each case, what you're doing is you're appealing, which means you point to somebody else higher up and ask them for their opinion. So that's what we mean by appeal here. Now, what's an authority figure? What does it take to count as an authority figure? You can give me an example or actual definition here. What's an authority?
President.
Yeah, president would be one. And why is the president an authority figure? What is it about the president that makes them an authority?
His reputation.
So reputation, but it's not, so that's one thing that allows somebody to have authority or leads to them being given authority. But even if you've got a crappy reputation, you can still be the president and still have authority. What is the defining feature of authority? What is it that the president has that none of us do?
Power.
Power. That's the key. Power. So an authority is somebody who has power, and that generally means it can be religious power, emotional power, temporal, on the ground, legal power. So an appeal to an authority is saying just the reason I should believe this is because someone with power says I should, or someone in power says it's true. So a classic case of an appeal to authority would be something in which, well, can anyone think of a case in which you're appealing to authority as your reason for doing something?
Disputing a traffic ticket.
Yeah, you dispute a traffic ticket, and what you do is you'd say, you are you judge or you officer are giving me a traffic ticket, but do you know who I am and who my friends are? My friend the mayor says you shouldn't give me a traffic ticket. Or another case would be something like a little kid. If a little kid says, why should, of a certain age, you say, little Johnny, why shouldn't you steal? What does little Johnny say usually? Why shouldn't he steal? Who said you shouldn't steal?
Well, my mom says it's bad.
Yeah, my mom says it's bad, or my mom says not to do it. So that's what an appeal to authority is. You just go to someone with power of some sort relative to you, and you just say, I shouldn't do this thing because they said so. Or another thing of, I should go to the Capitol building because Donald Trump said so. Or I should get vaccinated because my favorite celebrity said so. All of these are appeals to authority. Now, why is just appealing to an authority figure not a good premise or a good reason to accept an argument necessarily? Why is this sometimes wrong or fallacious or going to get you to the wrong conclusion?
Because you can blindly follow it without questioning.
Yeah, so just because somebody has an authority or position of power does not necessarily mean they're right. And just because they have authority in a certain area doesn't mean that they have all the knowledge about that area. So if you just follow them simply because they're an authority, you can end up following them blindly into a conclusion that you shouldn't necessarily reach. So for instance, when we can look at all these cases of people who are getting arrested for the Capitol break-in back in January. In these courts, has anyone been following like the defenses that these people have actually been giving for themselves, or that their lawyers have been giving as to why they shouldn't be charged for breaking into the Capitol?
Nope.
Yeah, it's basically, when you actually read the quotes, it's usually things like, the president called on me to do this. He said I need to fight for things. So they blindly appealed to the authority who said, you can't get in trouble for breaking into the Capitol, but that was wrong. They didn't question it, and now there are legal consequences. So that's what an appeal to authority is. It's going to somebody who has power and doing something simply because they have power. Now, an appeal to authority is closely related to a different type of reasoning. This type of reasoning is good. And in this type of reasoning, you're looking to somebody not just because they have power, but because of something else. So, for instance, wait, Michael. Oh, so how many of you are planning on getting vaccinated for COVID or have gotten vaccinated already because of any reasons? How many of us are planning? Yeah, I am. How many of you have actually done a scientific study that says it's going to be fine for you? I've not done such a study, and yet I still feel fine doing this. I still feel safe getting the vaccine. Why? Who told me it's okay? Who told me it's safe?
Well, is it because
Dr.
multiple
Fauci.
people?
Media?
Oh, there were a few of you talking at once. So let's go on Nicole first, Antonio, and then I don't know who the third one was. Nicole,
Well,
what?
is it because there's multiple reputable people who told you?
So that's the key. It's not just people. There's this reputable bit. Reputable. So who is it specifically that told me? Antonio, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just saying Dr. Fauci. Like,
Yeah, Dr. Fauci. There's the key word there, which is what? Doctor. There was a third person who wanted to say something.
Also, like family.
So family is another one. So another thing is, and for me personally, I asked my brother, and why, however, was it that I felt comfortable asking my brother? Well, he's a doctor. And here's a key difference between an appeal to authority and an appeal to an expert. An expert is somebody who has a lot of knowledge in a field. An authority is somebody who just has power. And very often, these two can go hand in hand. So for instance, why is Dr. Fauci the doctor that was all over the news? Why was he the one who was in all the giving all the PSAs? Well, because he's an expert, he's a top person in the field. So very often, somebody is an authority figure because they're an expert or they have expertise. However, the simple fact you should listen to experts on issues most of the time. Now, there might be times in which you are also an expert on an issue and you disagree with the other expert. So for instance, if you know how to fix cars and you go to the mechanic and they say you should do this one thing and you're like, no, I know my car better than the mechanic does. I'm also an expert, I can do it. But if you don't have expertise in an issue, it's helpful to ask somebody who does. So if you have a religious question, like a question about what a part of the Bible says if you are Christian, or what part of the Quran says if you're Muslim, you can ask who? Who would you ask? Well, your religious teacher, or somebody if you are Jewish, you might ask a rabbi. And in this case, why is it okay to ask this person? Well, they have a lot of knowledge on the topic. However, just because they have knowledge on that topic that gives them authority here doesn't mean that you should ask them about everything. So does everyone understand the difference here between an expert and authority? Nicole, I cut you off. I think you wanted to say something.
No, you didn't.
Okay. So what's another type of expert? Somebody who it's okay to ask them for their opinion on a certain topic. And what are they an expert in? And here's another key with experts is experts are not experts on everything. Your rabbi is maybe an expert on certain things, but things like nuclear physics, your rabbi is probably not an expert on nuclear physics. Your physics teacher might be. So what is an example of somebody who's an expert in a field that would be a good person to ask for the truth from? And what field are they good to ask things about?
I was gonna say, Professor. Nothing related to that. I was gonna say, like, what if a person's gone through the same experience already?
So yeah, that's actually a really good one. Personal experience. So if somebody if they've gone through a personal experience that makes them an expert on a topic. So for instance, why is it that very often if we lose a loved one, we are encouraged to reach out and talk to somebody else who's lost a loved one? Well, in some sense, they are an expert on that issue. If somebody tells you, like, one of the most important things to do is let yourself grieve, feel those feelings, and they are saying that from personal experience, they are an expert on that issue. Another one, Elios is a lawyer. A lawyer is somebody who has expertise in what?
Law.
Law, yeah, it's in the name. Lawyer is an expert in law. A personal trainer is somebody who is an expert in something. Specifically, what is your personal trainer going to be an expert in?
Well, I was gonna say, like, a personal trainer that has, like, notable clients.
Yeah, a personal trainer who has notable, like, the person who's in charge of helping professional athletes is somebody who is an expert in that field. Like LeBron James is not just going to hire nobody, like somebody who's like, does a push-up every once in a while and be like, that's my personal trainer. No, he's going to look for somebody who's a professional who knows the ins and outs of the human body and how to prevent injury, how to strengthen it, what types of exercises work. Psychiatrist is another one, somebody who understands mental issues and how to make them work and how to fix them. So in each of these cases, if somebody were to say something like, why do you drink protein shakes after every workout? You could say something like, my personal trainer told me to. And that would be a good reason to do something, so long as your personal trainer is a good personal trainer. Or if you say, I've started journaling, your friend's like, why have you started journaling? You're like, my psychologist told me it will help with my anxiety. Well, that's a good reason to believe them, because they're an expert on things like anxiety. However, just because they're an expert on things like anxiety doesn't mean they're an expert on everything. So if you're like, why are you making shellfish for dinner? And you're like, my psychologist told me to, like, not a very good reason. Or why did you decide to go to the beach for vacation? My personal trainer told me to. That's not a good reason. So it's good to point to experts so long as they are experts in the field you're talking about. And also, the key is an expert might have authority, but the fact that they have authority is not the reason you should trust them. You shouldn't trust your personal trainer because they are a trainer, this is their job. You should trust them because their expertise or their knowledge allowed them to get this job. You don't want somebody who's like, just because they happen to be named a certain position because who their father was doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be an expert, even if they have authority. So does everyone understand the key difference here between appealing to an expert and appealing to authority, and why experts are good people to point to and authority figures can be good so long as they're an expert, but not always? And this is what's called fallacious reasoning. So where is a case in which we find appeals to authority very often used in kind of a manipulative way? Can anyone think of a case in which you see an authority figure doing something, relying on the fact that they're an authority figure to try to get you to do something, even though they have no expertise in the field?
Donald Trump.
So Donald Trump would be one in which, and what was it? Well, anytime a politician says do something because I was elected, and that's the only reason, that would be a classic case of this. What other ones? How many of you watch TV lately? Or a YouTube video that you don't have a subscription? Oh yeah, Trump with the drink chlorine one was a classic example. He had authority, and then people said drink the chlorine, or drink bleach, and people did it simply because he was an authority figure. And this is a case in which it can go horribly wrong. But how many of you have just watched any television lately? Any takers? Or YouTube videos, or gone on the internet in any capacity? All right. So when you're watching TV or a video on YouTube, you click on the video, and what happens before you get to watch the video?
Advertisement.
Yeah, there's an advertisement. And sometimes in these advertisements, who's telling you to buy the thing? They don't just pick some random schmuck. Who do they pick?
An important person, like a football player or a basketball player, or
Yeah,
whatever.
they pick a famous person in a lot of cases. Or sometimes they pick a random politician or somebody who's very respected within the community, even though they know nothing about the topic. So for instance, you'll see something where it's like, yeah, here's a classic one I've been watching there's a Subway commercial right now with multiple NBA players talking about their Subway sandwich. It's like, what on earth reason does this professional athlete, who's an expert in professional athletics, but doesn't know anything about sandwiches? Michael, did you have something? Oh, no. So anytime you see a celebrity talking about something that they aren't a celebrity in. So for instance, the Kardashians are experts in certain types of things. And if they're selling those things, maybe you should listen to them. But just because a famous person is trying to get you to buy something doesn't necessarily mean you should listen. You have to ask yourself, why is this person saying this thing? Or are they just trying to get me to believe it because of the simple fact that they're an authority figure and trying to get me to follow along? All right. So that is the first one. The next one I want to talk about is straw man. So what is a straw man? And I don't mean it in the argument sense. I mean, where would you find a straw man? Like a literal person made of straw. What are we usually
Burning
call
Man?
them? Say that again, Valerie.
I don't know what we usually call them, but the only place I could think of is Burning Man.
So Burning Man is one, but I think the Burning Man one is actually made out of wood.
The scarecrow?
Yes, scarecrow. That's what I was going for. A scarecrow. So what is a scarecrow? Well, it's a literal shape of a person made out of straw. Now, what's the point of a straw man? Well, it's designed to kind of look like a person, but it's not really a person. So in the context of this, the way to think of a straw man is as something that looks like an argument somebody would give, but isn't really an argument, in the same way that a scarecrow looks like a person, but isn't really a person. And what a straw man is in the context of an argument is, it's a case in which you say, this is what somebody's argument is, but then instead of saying what their argument actually is, you put in an extreme or absurd version of it, and then you disprove that absurd version. So think of it this way. If you were trying to prove how badass you were, even though you had no strength and no fighting skills, you might go at a very far distance and beat up a scarecrow. And therefore, somebody would be like, wow, they really beat that person up. But if you get closer, you realize they didn't prove they were badass. They punched a scarecrow. So in a straw man argument, what you do is you say, I'm going to disprove your argument. But then instead of saying what somebody actually believes, you say something that's an absurd version of what they believe and then disprove that. So a classic case of this is when politicians accuse each other of holding very extreme views. So when people say things like, so very often like an extreme left-wing or extreme right-wing politician will get accused of, so you'll hear things like, don't vote for so-and-so, they're a Nazi. They believe in Nazi views. Well, sometimes they might, but more often, somebody's just being called a Nazi when really what they believe is a more like open capitalist system or something like that. In the same way, like Bernie Sanders, people will often say, don't vote for Bernie. He's trying to turn America communist. Bernie Sanders has never stated he wanted America to be communist. He has socialist views, which are different. So it's instead of saying like, you shouldn't vote for Bernie because he's a communist. Well, really, that's not attacking Bernie's actual views. That's a straw man of Bernie's actual views. Other cases would be things in which you, instead of somebody will say something like, so-and-so said it's sometimes, another classic case of this is in discussions of abortion. Both sides are guilty of accusing the other side of very extreme views. So for instance, sometimes the pro-life people will say things like, if you like abortion, you love it when babies die. Well, in truth, nobody who says that a woman should be allowed an abortion believes that a baby's like dying is a good thing. Rather, their view is that in certain circumstances, a woman should be able to have an abortion. That is not the same as yay, killing babies. So what you do is you replace the person's actual views with something that's similar and more extreme. And then you attack the extreme view to try to discredit the person's actual views. So you like, it's a bait and switch sort of approach. So that's what a straw man is. Does anyone have any straw people arguments that come to mind? I feel like they were all over the place during the election. But does everyone understand generally what a straw man argument would be?
Yes.
Okay, so why does a straw man argument sometimes look good? Well, because criticizing a bad argument is a good way of reasoning. If somebody actually has a bad view or has a bad argument or has poor reasoning, it's a good way to discredit their conclusion by pointing out the flaws in it. The key is, though, you have to make sure you're characterizing them correctly. So if somebody says, sometimes it's okay to drink human blood, that doesn't mean they think you should always drink human blood. I'm sure all of you could think of some crazy circumstance in which you would think it's okay to drink human blood. You know, it's the only thing available and otherwise you'll die because some evil sorcerer has you captured. So in that sort of case, but somebody might say something like, if I say something like, you could construct a straw man on me. You could say something like, our professor says you should drink blood. That shows how crazy he is. Well, that's not what I said. I said, it's sometimes okay in extreme circumstances to drink blood. Or a better case is, I might say, like, in the most extreme of circumstances, you might have to resort to cannibalism to survive. That would be something that I actually said, and you might criticize that. But it would be a straw man to say, our professor is a cannibal, therefore you shouldn't believe him. Now, if I was actually eating people, that would be a different matter. But does everyone understand just the general idea of a straw man? And basically, if you want to find straw man arguments, just go in the comments section anywhere on the internet. Everyone is just accusing each other of crazy views that nobody actually supports. All right. Everyone understand what straw man is and why it can be persuasive. So whenever somebody attacks a view and you're reading about it, you see it on TV, make sure that what they're attacking is a view the person actually holds and isn't just a straw man version of it. All right, we good? Can I move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Criticizing. So the first one was, I'm going to do this one in reverse. This was something we talked about a couple weeks ago, disjunctive syllogism. Anyone remember what disjunctive syllogism was? It was a good way of reasoning. Does anyone remember what it looked like?
If it's A or B and it's not A, it has to be B.
Yeah, if it's either A or B and it's not A, then it has to be B. This is a disjunctive syllogism and is a good way of reasoning. And it is closely related to this other thing, which false dilemma. What a false dilemma is a case in which you make it look like a disjunctive syllogism, but isn't actually a disjunctive syllogism. And the reason why is generally because this is not true. What does it take? How many possible things can exist if A or B is true? How many possible answers are there? If A, two. So what you do in a false dilemma is you tell somebody as if there were only two answers, when really there are many other answers. So these are cases in which you say something like, you either love Donald Trump or you aren't a real American. And you don't love Donald Trump, therefore you're not a real American. That's the sort of case in which, well, the first thing isn't true. There are many options other than just you love Donald Trump or not a real American. Those aren't the only two options. You could also be a real American who has some positive feelings for Trump and some negative feelings for Trump. What is a real American? But this is the general idea. Another one would be something in which you say, like, you only have two options. You can either, what would be can anyone think of a case of a false dilemma? A case in which you tell somebody something as if they only had two options, and you tell them that one of them is a bad option, trying to force them to take the other option, when really they have many different choices to choose from. Think of a peer pressure case if you want to try to think of an example of this.
What about like get the vaccine?
Yeah. So what would that case?
I mean, if you don't get vaccinated, you're gonna get the virus, and
Yeah,
probably you're gonna die.
So that would be a classic case of this. Even if you are somebody who believes that you should get the vaccine, and even if you're someone who says this, that is a false dilemma. Either you get the vaccine or you die. And I know you don't want to die, so get the vaccine. Even though I agree with the conclusion, get the vaccine, that is a fallacious bit of arguing. That is a false dilemma. Another case is, if you don't like dogs or you don't like cats, then you don't like animals. I'm trying to think, would this be one? If you don't like cats or dogs, then you don't. I think this is closely related. This would count as a false dilemma, Elio, but it's a slightly different one, where you either like one that sticks more closely to this formula would be either you like dogs or you like cats, and you don't like dogs, therefore you like cats. Well, in that case, it's actually, that's not true. You could hate both dogs and cats. Another one would be either you don't like dogs or cats, or you don't like animals. And I know you don't like dogs and cats, therefore you don't like animals. But in truth, somebody could just love fish or love other things. So there's a closely related one there, Elio, but the one you put is not quite exactly the same as these others. But what you put there is also a bad bit of reasoning, where that's something we'll come back to next time, which is called an overgeneralization. So does everyone understand? A classic case is, you've got two teenagers. One of the teenagers is trying to get the other teenager to do something that they like, A is trying to get B to do something that B doesn't want to do and that's technically illegal. What is A gonna say in this case? You either do this thing or what's the typical?
I will tell, or I'll tell authorities that you did do it.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Or I'll tell authorities that you did do this. Or very often they'll say things like, or you're a insert insulting word here. Or you're a complete coward. That is giving someone a false dilemma. If you don't jump off the bridge, you're still not like, if you punch the person in the face, you're not a coward and you didn't jump off the bridge. Any type of hazing sort of case, this is the sort of reasoning. It relies on false dilemmas. So everyone understand what a false dilemma is. It's a case in which you pretend or you make it seem like somebody is only has two choices, when in truth they have three or more. So disproving one of them doesn't prove what they should do. Also, any sort of case like in the movies in which somebody says like, you're either with me or you're against me. Any sort of black and white thinking, that is a false dilemma. Any more questions on that one? All right. Ad hominem. Has anyone heard this phrase before? It's a stupid Latin way of saying something. Has anyone actually heard of it in this way? If you haven't, that's totally normal. I'm just curious. All right. Ad hominem is a personal attack. So an ad hominem attack is instead of attacking somebody's argument, you just attack them. So what would be a classic case of this? Or can you think of a case in which you've seen this? Just think about the internet, think about anything. What is an example of an ad hominem attack that you can think of? Well, here's an example. Say I'm trying to convince you that you should do your homework. And you don't think you should do your homework. So you are trying to explain to somebody else why they shouldn't do their homework. If you're giving an ad hominem attack, what might you say? What would be an ad hominem attack in this case, Valerie?
Like, you could say you suck at homework anyway.
So that would actually be, it would be more an ad hominem attack if you were explaining to this person, like that you could kind of twist as homework or explaining why they shouldn't do it because you're going to fail anyway. So that's not quite an ad hominem attack. It would be more of an ad hominem attack if you were like explaining why the person saying you should had a negative characteristic that had nothing to do with homework. So something like you're just ugly, or you're smelly, or you have no sense of fashion. All of these things have nothing to do with homework. You're just attacking a person. Jock, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, like, if you do homework, you're not cool.
Yeah, that might be another thing, would just be, if you do that homework, you're not cool, or you're just a stupid person if you do homework, you're a square. Like, all of these are just personal attacks. Anytime a politician insults a politician's character or gives them a mean nickname, that's an ad hominem attack. Think about like high school groups in which somebody says, somebody's like, well, I think I should do it. My mom told me so. And then somebody's like, yeah, well, your mom's stupid and old. Like, that's just an ad hominem attack, attacking somebody just for who they are as a person. That's an ad hominem attack. Attacking someone simply because of the color of their skin. You say, I don't believe that person's argument because they are blank race. That is an ad hominem attack. That is an ad hominem attack a racist would give. So does everyone understand what an ad hominem attack is? It's just literally, just watch the political debates from the last time in which they were, sleepy Joe Biden, lying Hillary, all of that was personal ad hominem attacks. So that's what an ad hominem argument is. Instead of actually dealing with the substance of it, because a smelly, ugly person is perfectly capable of constructing a really good argument. The fact that they're smelly and ugly doesn't mean anything. However, why is it that ad hominem attacks are sometimes effective? Or why is it that sometimes, what is the related attack, which looks like an ad hominem, but is actually not quite the same? Anyone have any idea? What would it be to attack somebody's person, but actually have that a good reason of arguing against them, or a good reason not to believe them? Here's the way to bring it out. So, my fashion sense is not great. So if I'm talking to you about logic, and your argument is you shouldn't listen to Professor, he has bad fashion, is that a good reason not to listen to me?
No.
About logic?
No.
No. My fashion sense has nothing to do with my knowledge of logic or reasoning. If, however, if somebody has a bad fashion sense, what shouldn't you listen to them on?
Fashion.
Fashion, clothing. That is, so sometimes an ad hominem attack is just attacking a person. Sometimes when you're pointing out something, you're attacking their credentials. So sometimes pointing out somebody's like characteristics or their negative things is pointing out that they aren't really an expert. So if you say Professor Neely is, you shouldn't listen to Professor Neely about logic because he got his he's been pretending he has a degree this whole time and has actually never taught in his life and had to murder the last person to get the job. Well, then you shouldn't listen to me, because the fact that I know nothing on logic means you shouldn't listen to me. If, however, you're just attacking me because I don't shower enough, or my hair needs to be cut, or my clothes are bad, unless you're interested in clothes or hair or anything like that, you should listen to me on other areas. In the same way, like if somebody has amazing hair, then they're probably somebody who you should listen to about hair. If somebody has terrible hair, don't listen to them. And saying they have terrible hair is a good reason not to listen to them about hair cutting or hairstyles. In the same way, if your professor is really, if you point out like you shouldn't take a class with this professor because they're very unclear and can't explain anything, well, that's attacking their credentials as a teacher. That's okay. But they wear stupid looking glasses is not a good reason to not take their class unless it's a class in like visual fashion. So does everyone understand that difference too? And so when you see people attacked on the internet, don't just like, don't just believe because this person's being attacked, you shouldn't listen to their conclusion. In online video game playing, this is often comes up. People get attacked simply because of their gender or simply because of what they sound like on a microphone, which has nothing to do with how good they are. By contrast, if the person really sucks at something, you can say, I don't want them on my team because they really suck. But attacking them as a person is not a good reason for that. All right, everyone on board with that last one?
Question: attack on credentials then could also be a good thing?
Yeah, so an attack on credentials is actually a very valid way to say that someone's conclusion is a bad one. So if a doctor's like, you shouldn't take the vaccine, and then you find out by doctor they didn't actually ever study medicine and just like chose to put that in front of their name because they thought it would sound cool, or was an honorary degree that has nothing to do with medicine, then saying, this person says you should get the vaccine, but they're not actually a doctor. Or this person says vaccines don't work, but they aren't actually a doctor. That's a good way of pointing out a flaw in their argument. An argument of A doesn't know what they're talking about, and A says this, therefore don't listen to this. That is a good way of doing it. That is a good way of reaching a good conclusion. However, the fact that very often people try to prove that somebody doesn't know what they're talking about by pointing to some totally unrelated fact about them, like where they were born or what they like to do on the weekends or something like that. Was that answering, Valerie?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. So is everyone on board right now? We've been a bit quieter tonight, probably because we're like a third of the way into the semester and everyone could use a break and it's almost spring and we can almost taste it, and yet it's still cold and dark out. Any more questions, comments, concerns, feelings on this? All right, the last one then, if nobody's got any questions. Okay. The last one is two wrongs make a right. So two wrongs make a right. In this style of reasoning, or in this fallacy, what you do is, instead of arguing that why what you did was okay, you instead argue that somebody else has done the same bad thing. So a classic case of this is all the arguments that politicians throw around about things like blackface. So instead of some politician coming along and being like, you're right, putting on blackface is terrible and I'm a bad person and I don't understand why this is bad and therefore you shouldn't listen to me, they'll instead say something like, well, that person over there put on blackface, therefore the fact I did is perfectly fine. Or another one, a little kid does something naughty. What is very often their reason that they did it? Or what do they say to their parents when they did it? Well, it can be something like Michael or Mike.
Maybe to like, I don't know, or like, I just did it.
I just did it. Or who might they point to as giving them a good reason to do it?
Oh, the parents?
Either the parents. So it'll be something like, Billy, don't use the word fuck. And you're like, but I heard daddy use it, so it's fine if I use it. Well, the fact that that daddy did it doesn't change the fact that the kids shouldn't be doing it according to this other parent. Whether you believe that, swearing's dumb, as like caring about that stuff is not something I process. But I guess that's what happens when you have a dad who puts most sailors to shame. But yeah, so to say like, I did it because somebody else did it, but everybody's doing it, Mom. Like, you aren't allowed to do that. But Mom, everybody's doing it. That's not a good reason to do something. It's not a good reason. Pointing out that somebody else has done it or pointing out that other people do that is not a good justification for you doing it. The fact that other people also did it only shows that there are more wrong people, not that you're in the right. So oftentimes, anytime somebody of one group points to the fact another group did it, oftentimes in war, the justifications for atrocities in war are things like, well, the other side was doing it, so we had to slaughter civilians too. Well, the fact that the other side was doing it doesn't mean that you are okay slaughtering civilians. All it means is that both sides were being very bad. Now,
isn't that subjective? Sorry, Professor.
No, say that.
Isn't that sort of subjective though? I mean, like, who determines what's morally right?
So I think. So that is a great question of morally right and morally wrong. What I want to say on that is we will be coming back in a lot more depth about what counts as morally right or morally wrong. And I think you're spot on. That is a much more complicated situation than what I just described. But what I do want to say is even whether it's what you did was right or wrong has nothing to do with whether somebody else did it. If you did something wrong, then whether it's wrong or not is independent of whether other people are doing it. And if other people are doing it, it doesn't suddenly change the fact it's right or wrong. Like, killing might be right in one circumstance and it might be wrong in another circumstance. It might be right in one culture in a certain way, wrong in another culture. But if the reason that you think it's okay is that other cultures are doing it or other people are, that doesn't show that you're correct. So for instance, like, my neighbor killed somebody and got away with it, therefore it's okay that I did. Or human sacrifice was practiced in this other culture, therefore it should be totally fine here. Maybe it should be okay that we have human sacrifice, but the fact that some other group did it doesn't tell one way or the other. Does that make sense, Dale?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so yeah, that's the two wrongs make a right is just the idea of the fact that somebody else did it doesn't make it okay that you're doing it. Now, it is, however, related to something that does seem I have no idea how to spell this word. I spell it differently every time, but I think you'll know what I'm talking about. Point out hypocrisy. That is a good way of arguing against someone. Now, what is hypocrisy? What is it to be a hypocrite?
So basically, when you say don't do something, but you do it yourself.
Exactly. A hypocrite is somebody who says one thing but does the opposite. And why don't we like hypocrites? Well, because there's an intrinsic dishonesty behind it. And also, there's something about hypocrisy of very often what a hypocrite is saying is trying to convince other people to behave in a certain way. So it'll be things like, you can't do this, it's morally wrong, that is a bad thing to do. And then you actually watch their own behaviors and you see, wait, they're saying you have to do one thing, but they're not living by it. They are dishonorable, they are dishonest. So in certain cases, hypocrisy is very, like, it is a negative thing, and it can be useful to point out hypocrisy. So if somebody says something like, everyone should give up all of their possessions, we should have a totally equal society, and then you find that they live in a like $20 million mansion, there's something somewhat disconcerting about that. Also, if you find out somebody's like, you can't get into heaven unless you behave in way X, Y, and Z, or if you are attracted to people of your own sex or gender, you're never going to get into heaven. And then you find out that on the side, they're actually homosexual, and yet they're preaching to anti-Semitism, or not anti-Semitism, homophobia, or somebody who's saying like, everyone needs to have equal opportunities, but then not living by that. That's a way of pointing out that this isn't necessarily the sort of person you want leading you. So for instance, if a politician is saying something like, I believe in equality for everybody, vote for me, and then in their personal life, they're actually very like personally racist, you might go, oh, that person doesn't really represent what I want them to. That's something to point out, and that's a reason not to vote for this person. So pointing out hypocrisy is a good way of pointing out that sometimes that person isn't necessarily qualified for the job. So it's kind of related to this, this attack on credentials. When you point out someone's a hypocrite, that can look like, because you're saying they're saying one thing but doing another. So that can make it seem because that can be a good argument. Two wrongs make a right can seem okay as well. But two wrongs make a right is not a good way of arguing. Simply saying somebody else did a bad thing, therefore I can do it, or somebody else did it that way, somebody else holds those views, somebody else said that, or threw a COVID party, therefore it's okay that I threw a COVID party. That's not a good justification. However, saying that person says you should have strong restrictions, and then we saw them throwing a COVID party, that shows they're a hypocrite and not somebody who should hold office in America. So that's the difference there between point out hypocrisy and two wrongs make a right. Does this make sense to everybody? That final difference here. All right. I have nothing else then to add on what I wanted to say. We have reached the end of the time. Next class, we'll be talking about more fallacies. The homework for next week is just going to be, is this a fallacy? Is it not? It should be easier than the one for this week. And I will be handing back the homework that was due on Saturday. I'll hand that back tomorrow. So I'm going to stop the recording now. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stick around. If not, have a great evening, and I'll see you all next week.
Okay, good night.